In this application note, we're going to talk about fonts. I've got a very basic project here. I've stripped down the standard new project that you get when you say File, New Project, down to a single page, Home, and when you open up the Project Resources area under Fonts, and if you just kind of expand it all the way down, you'll see something like this. You'll see, under the fonts, you'll see something maybe called fmain or some name of a font. And then underneath that, you'll see this thing, 20 plain. Okay, so what is all this? First of all, you need fonts in your project. If you don't have a font and you delete these fonts, you're going to have an error in your GUI because you need at least a default font installed. Now, a font comes from a TrueType file. So in this case, the standard out-of-the-box template gives you something called square721.truetype. So any TrueType font can be used. You just need that TTF file. And a TTF file is megabytes in size usually. It includes all kinds of different characters. Now the 721 font is actually a nice open source public domain font. You can use it in your GUIs. And but it's not a huge font. If I bring up the Windows character map program, this is just a little utility that comes with Windows, you can actually bring up the Square 721 font and take a look if you've installed it. And you see that here's all the characters, and I'll slide down. There's not that many of them. Certainly enough for English and Western European languages, Spanish, French, and German, and you've got all the basic numbers and characters. But you'll notice that even in CharMap, there are some boxes here, which means that those characters aren't available. There's no glyph for them. The glyph is the symbol of the character. Now, the character set, you need to expand beyond the plain old ASCII, which was, at best, 255 different characters available. So beyond ASCII is something called Unicode. Unicode is, standard 16-bit Unicode is 65,000 different glyphs or symbols that you can have available in your font. And you're not going to want to include all 65,000 glyphs in your GUI. That would be megabytes of font data, and you don't need all those symbols in your GUI. So the trick is to figure out which symbols or code points you need in your GUI, and SHIPTide has some capabilities of auto figuring that out, but you want to start with a basic set. So if you look at what we've done here, under the font, we've got a font we've called it fmain. It's referring to this TrueType font. And it's got code points hex 20 through 1FF, so that's all the printable ASCII, extended ASCII characters. And then a couple more up at 201F, 2265, which if I hover over this character in CharMap, you'll see that 2122 is the trademark sign. So I want the trademark and a few other characters that are kind of handy when you're building a GUI. So I've included specifically and said I want these characters in my GUI. You can actually get more that get auto-added, but these are the basic set that you want to guarantee are in your GUI. Now, the question is, how big do you want those fonts to be? So if I go into underneath each font, you're going to see one or more instantiations of that font. And in this case, we've got a 20 pixel high font. And it's anti-aliased with 8 bits per pixel of anti-aliasing, and it's a plain style as opposed to italic bold. Now, anti-aliasing is that smoothing around the edges of characters. If you turn anti-aliasing off or set the font bits per pixel down to, let's say, 2, it's going to be pretty jaggy. So let's add a new instantiation of a font. Let's add a new size, font info. Okay, let's create a 48 pixel high font. Let's turn anti-aliasing off and just make it plain. Okay, and now we see the 48 pixel size here added to fmain. And it's going to use, all of these that are in here are going to use this set of code points. If I want to include a different set of code points, I can create another inclusion of the font. Okay, so now I've got 2 sizes available. So when SHIPTide builds your GUI, it's going to take this font, extract those characters, and generate the bitmaps, compressed, of these different sizes of fonts with the anti-aliasing and all the characteristics. Those are the characters in those sizes available to your GUI at runtime, which is obviously a very small subset of all the possibilities. and therefore your GUI is a little smaller than if you included all 65,000 characters in all different sizes. Okay, so let's just add a simple piece of text to this GUI, and we can start playing with the text. And I'm going to say, hello world. Okay, and nothing appears. It's in the top left-hand corner, and that's because it's white. If you go up to we've got a background color on this page of white, and if you've watched the video on text and herons, you know that we go up here and we've set the default text color to white. So I'm going to turn that to black. Okay, and then hello world appears. And if I go down to this text, let's just center it in the screen. I'm going to change. I want to get pixel accurate, so I'm going to change this to exactly 100%. And I'm going to center this text in the screen by changing its text H-align and V-align properties. And there we are. Now, it's inheriting the size from the root node, which has 20 plain. If I change that to and you see if I pull this down, I now have the 48 available from adding this. And you'll see here we are, 48. Now, if you remember, this is, we had turned anti-aliasing off. Now, let's go zoom in and take a look. Sure enough, you'll see it's pretty jaggy. Now, that may be good enough once you get it on your user interface. In fact, if we go back down to 100%, you really can't tell that there's a lot of jaggies going on. But it may become apparent when you get it on your GUI and look at it on the screen. So let's go back to that 48 pixel, and let's turn anti-aliasing on. And at that point, look at it became much smoother around the edge of the characters, even though I've only got 2 bits per pixel. Now, 2 bits per pixel, that's 4 different levels of gray around the edge of that font. If I go up to 8 bits per pixel, you will see this font get a lot smoother now. Okay, and if we go down to 100%, it's quite smooth. Now, the disadvantage of going 8 bits per pixel is it takes a lot more memory on your user interface installed in the GUI. So the idea here is to choose as little as you need in terms of anti-aliasing to get the look and feel that you want. And if you can do it without anti-aliasing, that's great. That's a single bit per pixel. Okay, so now we've got this piece of text, hello world, and we've got it in 20 and 48 point font. Now, if we want to, we can add another font. So let's do that right now. Let's add a new font. Now, it's by default populated the printable ASCII and the trademark symbol. And I'm going to give this another one called F other font. And I'm going to choose a font file that's up on my desktop in my fonts directory. And this one is UME Plus P Gothic, which is actually a great little font. I shouldn't say little. It has an enormous number of characters in it. All the Japanese characters, Chinese characters. There's a few characters, code points that are missing out of the font, but it's a great public domain open source font that you can use for international GUIs. And I'm going to add that right in here. And now I've instantiated the font with some basic characters. And I'm going to add, now I have to instantiate it, so I'm going to maybe choose 4 bits per pixel with anti-aliasing on. And I'm going to make it plain size, and let's do 32 pixels high. So now I've got another font that's available. So let's go back to my hello world, and instead of that font, I'm going to choose my other font. Now, when I do that, look at text size, it's gone red. That's because I'm inheriting that 48 pixel high font from the home page, the head of the display. Well, we don't have a 48 pixel version of this font. So when I click this, it's going to say 32, and there we go. We go down to a 32 pixel version of that font. It's a little different than the 721. If I go back to that, again, if I go back to the font and I change this and maybe go to 48 pixel. I've been working too much in Adobe. Now, 48 pixel means I go back to this text, and of course it's got the text size set, so let's change it back to 48, and we're back at 48. Now we can switch back and forth between the two fonts. Take a look. So there's the main font, which is that 721. It's a fairly, notice the O's are kind of square, and we go to the other font, and the O's are a little more rounded. Basically the same size font, just a different font style. So now I've got a couple different fonts available. Okay, now what happens if I enter a character that is not in the character set that I've selected. So I'm going to bring up my web browser here, and I'm going to go to Google Translate. And I'm going to put in English, hello world. And I'm going to convert that to simplified Chinese. Oh, maybe that's not the best. Traditional, let's choose Japanese. Let's pick a, there we go. Okay, we've got some Japanese characters there. Konnichiwa, Sakai. So let's grab this set of characters right here. Let's grab Konnichiwa. There we are. And I'm going to go back to my GUI, and I'm going to change hello world to that series of Japanese characters. I just pasted it in there. And there we go. There's our Japanese characters, because they're available in that font. If I choose the main font, those characters are not available in that font. That's a font issue. You need to make sure that you have fonts that have the characters or code points that you need in order to render the characters that you want. So let's go back to the other font here, which has all of our international characters in it, and you see we've got our Konnichiwa, hello world. Okay, but recall we didn't actually specify all those characters. If we actually go into the code points and see what code points these are beyond the ones that we specified in this range. So watch what happens when we build a cargo. I'm going to export my cargo, and in my debug window here, I got lots of debugging turned on, but I'm going to go back up to the top of this debug window, and I'm going to slide down until I find the little spot that, let's find in this debug window here, auto added. Let's just say added, because I know that's what it starts with. There it is. On F main, there were 0 code points auto added. Let's go down, and here we are. So I'm going to look at the little debug, and you can see that there were 5 code points auto added to font F other font. In other words, what happened was SHIPTide went through and found these characters in the text that you have in your GUI and said, wait a minute, your font doesn't have those listed by default in this set, and it's automatically added code point 3061, 3053, and so on, those code points. So you don't have to be too specific. As long as they're in your GUI somewhere, it will go find them. It will automatically add them to your code points that are compiled down and into your GUI. So let's review text and fonts. Fonts, you can always add a new font. Just say add new font, and go in and pick the font, the true type font that you want. Give it a name, F readout, let's say, in this one, because the Eugenia font is a cool little font that is more like a readout. And when you have a font included, now instantiate the various pixel sizes you want, like 48 pixels. Watch how many bits per pixel on your anti-aliasing. You probably want some. Don't do too many, or it'll make your GUI very, very large. And then go in and add your text that you want. Whatever 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will appear in the font that you've selected. Now in this case, it's getting the inherited font, and let's change it to the readout font, and there we are. We now have our characters in the readout font.